It's Zach Eady with Purdue men's basketball, and you're watching Boilers in the Stands.
Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I'm your host, Greg Braggs Jr. Alongside me is special guest Bobby Buckets Riddell, current color analyst for Purdue men's basketball radio and former all-star, shooting star, star guard of our Purdue Boilermakers. Yeah, I guess you up a little bit. It's your first time on this year. You've been a friend of the show for a long time now, putting up with my nonsense. And so, yeah, I'm going to gas you up a little bit. How you doing, Bobby? Welcome back.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's good to be back. Yeah, first time this year. So obviously it's been a phenomenal season thus far. So happy to talk some hoops.
Yeah, Craig Bowers is going to be here in a minute. He's efforting some technical difficulties. You know, you guys living all the way out, and I live in, closer to a normal civilization. You guys live in the middle of nowhere, so getting the internet to work where Craig lives is easier said than done. But like Bobby said, he has no internet issues when the great Andrew Bay comes on, but Bobby comes on, and all of a sudden technical difficulties
sure.
hit. I think it's personal. I do think it's personal, but yeah, let's get into it, man, because it's exciting stuff. Big Ten play is right around the corner next week. Got one more, no disrespect to who we play, but somewhat of a tune-up game coming up here on Friday. And it's been a lot of fun. Once again, this team living up to the expectations. Last year, I think they exceeded expectations early on, catapulting, going from unranked to number one in the country. This year, they come into the season as a top 3 team ranked in the country and stay there and get up to 1. Northwestern beats them, fight their way back to number 1 after beating Arizona in what was one of the better games I've seen Purdue play over the last 4 or 5 years, and they've played some really good ones. So now that we've gotten through this whole thing here, the first couple months, what is your beat on this team, Bobby? Because, we can talk about the progression and everything, but I think the elephant in the room continues to be, will they be different than all these other teams that fail in March? And yeah, it's unfair to this team to continue to skip ahead to that moment. There's important games to come, which I'm sure we'll cover. But from what you're seeing so far, do these guys give you, that hope that they may be able to overcome some of these demons they've been fighting?
Yeah, I think this is a special team. I mean, that's my outlook on it. I think they got all the pieces that you need to cut down the nets, frankly. So they've obviously got off to a great start this year, undefeated in the non-conference once again. Did have the slip up at Northwestern where, we certainly didn't play our best basketball, but you got to give Northwestern a lot of credit to. Boo Buie obviously spearheaded that win for Northwestern, playing extremely well with all the 30-plus points. I think it was 9 assists, no turnovers. So played a great floor game on top of the scoring. And then, really gets lost a little bit as their other 2 guards, Ty Berry and Ryan Langborg, shot the heck out of the ball that day, both scoring 20-plus. So it really took, a great performance from Northwestern, and give them credit. They rose to the occasion on that day. But we obviously did not play our best basketball that day either. But, even for us to lose in overtime, it did take, a valiant effort by that Northwestern team that day. So I like the pieces a lot this year. It's been said a million times, but of course, the Lance Jones acquisition, it really just feels like he filled in a lot of those missing pieces from last year's team, as far as just giving that speed and athleticism, and another playmaker, the press. Of course, when you have those 3 ball handlers, Lance, Fletcher, and Braden, the press feels like it's a non-issue, and really anything, we're kind of inviting the press at this point, because it feels like we can get easy scoring opportunities by breaking it and then playing advantage basketball at that point. So, yeah, I love this team. Zach Edey is as dominant as ever. He's a joy to watch every game. And, Braden Smith's taken his game to another level, which I think has certainly been pivotal as far as just having another guy that pretty much game in, game out for the most part. You can pretty much expect what you're going to get from him as far as that scoring production, that playmaking production from the point guard position. He seems as confident as ever in his game.
Man.
So,
Yep.
Sky's the limit, I think, for this team.
No, I agree with you. Braden Smith is the biggest development of any kind of hopes of what this team can do here in the future. It's not just how well he's playing. He played well last year. That confidence, the swagger. I love the way he played against Arizona. It's not just like one of those things where he's like, wow, like this excitement that he's playing well. He kind of exudes this confidence, like, I know I'm going to do this, and I'm going to not only do it, but I'm going to show you up while I'm doing it a little bit, which, shows the competitive side of him. And look who joins us. Look who the cat drug in. It's Craig Bowers. He didn't big time Bobby. That was nice. That was nice of you.
No big time. And it wasn't my internet. My camera's been going wonky, and I've been meaning to go get a replacement camera so I don't run into this situation. But every once in a while, my camera just drops for some reason and quits working. So I was trying to get that rolling. How we doing, Bobby?
Doing great, Craig. Yeah, good seeing you.
It doesn't look like you're in the basement today.
I am in the basement, actually.
Oh, are you?
Got a little bit of a different setup down here now. Yeah.
I got you. As you look at this season, and a lot's been said here just recently, but now 24 weeks in a row ranked in the top 5, going back to last year. You talk about the amount of time, ranked in the top 5, multiple weeks over both seasons in terms of being ranked number 1. Where do you put this stretch just in perspective, right? Greg hasn't been a Purdue basketball fan as long as you and I.
Right.
But there's a lot of listeners that have been fans before we were born. So, just putting this stretch into perspective, are we in a golden era of Purdue basketball right now, even though we've had some March issues?
For sure. I think unquestionably we are, considering you talk about reaching the number 1 ranking 3 years consecutively, and it never happened in program history prior to this year. So I think without a doubt, we're talking about a golden era, and maybe not the greatest era in Purdue history, but certainly in that conversation. Of course, what this team is able to do in the postseason this year could certainly play a part in potentially putting this era towards the top. But, I think at this point, this era is right up there, and a lot of season left to be played. But depending on how this season unfolds, assuming it kind of goes, at least in the regular season, like I think a lot of us think it will, I think you got to put this, at least 3-year run in there, with that 3-year run in the mid-90s, probably that 3-year run in the late 80s with the 3 Amigos and that team. And then you start to get a little bit before my time as far as remembering some of these things. But I would think the Rick Mount run, of course, they made the national title game that one year. They probably had a pretty good 3-year run. Rick's sophomore, junior, and senior year, because I don't think he was even able to play as a freshman. But I think you can put this 3-year run probably right up there with some of the other 3-year runs in Purdue history. And hopefully this third season ends with some great moments to come.
Well, I mean, let's be real, guys. I mean, when I showed up, 6-7 years ago, the first year I was a season ticket holder, they were undefeated at home and won the Big Ten championship. And they went to the Elite Eight and damn near the Final Four. And since then, you two have become my friend, which I'm sure was a great honor for both of you. Purdue is in a golden era. I mean, are you guys starting to see who the common denominator is? I mean, we can credit Zach Edey all we want, but I mean, come on,
Made a strong influence. I think the Boilers and stands. I think all the guys probably watch it. They get inspired by it. That's without a doubt what happens.
I think you're right. That's a fair question. We did have a question in the chat. When you talk about golden era, I was going to save it for the end, but I guess since we're just talking about this, what's going on right now, Jason Depoy, hopefully I'm not butchering your last name, Jason. He
Depew.
asked Depew. I apologize, Jason. I did mess it up. Would love to hear the conversation on next year's scholarship situation. I was thinking with all the incoming freshmen, they'd be over one scholarship. Please correct me if I'm mistaken. And our guy Joe Jackson is great at breaking this stuff down. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight for the interview, but Bobby, I think they have 6 incoming freshmen, right, next year, and it's one of the highest rated classes they've ever had. And some of these guys coming in, obviously we all know, are excited to see Kanan Catchings, but Jakari Harris, who's Glenn Robinson's, son, you just talked about the big dog era. Now his son is walking into an era that is what you guys are describing as the golden era. So yeah, talk about next year's incoming class and what their potential could be. And then also, how that could affect some scholarships here next year.
Sure. Yeah. Next year's class looks really special on paper. Certainly. It feels like they've gotten, a little bit of everything. Of course, as Coach Painter and his staff like to do, they like to recruit guys who are high IQ basketball players, guys who can shoot the basketball, are skilled. And it feels like they're getting a lot of these guys at these different positions. The big fellow, the 7-footer, Jacobson, appears to be a guy who can move really well for his size and can also shoot the basketball and has some skill level to him, which, in today's day, you just can't have enough skill on the floor as far as dribbling, passing, and shooting. And then, Jakari Harris is probably, the guy maybe on paper who's most ready to play right away as far as just his physical. He's got good size for his position, really skilled, can really shoot the basketball. It looks like can be probably, if not a primary ball handler, can be someone like similar to a Lance Jones who can, be a secondary ball handler a lot of times next to a guy like Braden, but then also, maybe spell some time as a primary ball handler when Braden's off the floor. So I think, and then from a defensive standpoint, it looks like he's a pretty good on-ball defender. So he might get some opportunity to come guard some really good players right away. So and then Kanan Catchings is that guy that really is tantalizing, right? He's got the length and the size and the skill level, it appears. I haven't seen him play a game in person, but just from some of the highlights, you're like, wow, this guy looks like someone who could be an NBA draft pick, certainly at some point down the road. And then, Jack Benner's a guy who can really shoot. He looks like he's right in that mold of Dakota Mathias, Sasha Stefanovic, Ryan Klein, Fletcher Lawyer. We keep bringing those guys in.
Now, he's in the Sasha mold, but all due respect to my great friend, Sasha Stefanovic, this dude broke a backboard after he dunked it on Sasha. Sasha almost got that one dunk that the refs blew dead on the play, but he wasn't breaking no backboards like this dude.
Yeah, of all those guys I listed off, Jack certainly appears to be the biggest and strongest and most athletic as far as being able to, as you said, dunk and break backboards, but also be able to shoot the basketball. And I think he plays a lot of point guard for his high school team, so he's got some ball handling to him. CJ Cox looks like a guy, like a PJ Thompson type dude to me, as far as who can handle it, shoot it from deep. Maybe even has a little bit more. I love PJ, but maybe a little bit more wiggle than PJ. So hopefully,
don't let him catch you saying
that. Hopefully, he can come in and contribute right away too. And then Riley Burgess is another guy who's probably similar to that Trey Kaufman-Renn, Caleb First, can play the 4 or the 5, skilled. And then you get to the scholarship situation. It is true, I guess, as of now, they would have one more scholarship than they have to give out. So it's a numbers game. Of course, I'm sure the staff has a plan for how they're going to go about that, whether that's, I guess, the two options are one of these guys goes to prep school or, someone transfers, which, of course, in today's transfer era, those things happen all the time. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out because, they can't have 14.
Yeah, essentially it's a spoil the riches. And that was just to just kind of illuminate this point that we're in kind of the golden era. Midwest Toker says, I'm not worried about next year, worried about that after the national championship. And I totally understand where you're coming from. Just wanted to give some love to our guy that had a question, for Bobby as far as scholarships and what next year's, incoming guys are concerned. But let's just let's direct back to this team and and talk about some of the things that are going on right now. Miles Colvin, if you want to talk about prospects, he was a guy that had a lot of hype, as an incoming freshman, people following his high school career, obviously, his family having lineage to the Purdue program, current and past, with Roosevelt Colvin, a former Chicago Bear and Purdue Boilermaker on football, so it's, yes, no problem, Jason, on the pronunciation. Sorry, I butchered it. So, but like Miles is interesting to me because I always enjoy kind of watching the freshmen climb, right? And who's going to pick this up and how fast and how long it takes them. Like what have you seen here from Miles as, being a guy that's kind of getting the cookie crumbs, and every time he comes out there, he's getting a little more experience, an opportunity to make a big shot, an opportunity to get a big rebound, and seeing where he can project over the next, over the rest of this year and the future of his career.
Sure. Yeah. Miles is really exciting. I mean, I give the staff, Coach Painter, a lot of credit for how they've handled, Miles and just kind of the roster construction to begin with, as far as, on paper, Miles has been kind of that 10th guy. Right. And we're in win now mode all the time, right? We're trying to win as many games as possible. We're trying to have our resume be as elite as it can be so we can get another number 1 seed and hopefully, make our path to the Final Four and beyond as easy as possible. And so, we're not out here just to throw away games. And it's tough when you have a young player like Miles who's so talented. You want to be able to give him opportunity. But when you're on this team like this and he's 9th, 10th guy, it's tough because you really want to try to maximize every possession. And I give coach and the staff credit. They've been able to throw him in there late in the first half or so, pretty much every game, and, give him opportunities to have success. And he's obviously had some games where he's really given us some nice lift off the bench. He, of course, can really shoot the basketball. Every time he shoots it, I'm confident it's going in. But, on the defensive side of the ball, he obviously has had some growing pains there, like a lot of freshmen have. And, he didn't, I think, in high school, his man-to-man defense, I'm not sure it was something that was emphasized a whole lot. They probably played some zone. And so he had a huge learning curve as far as defensively. But, his ability on offense is elite. And when you have Braden Smith and Zach Edey, you got to surround those guys with as much talent as possible a lot of the times from an offensive standpoint. And he obviously is a big piece of that when he's in the game. And so it's kind of worked out well. I feel like when he's come in and made a big impact, they'll kind of ride it out some more. Whereas if he's come in and maybe had a breakdown or two, maybe hasn't made a shot, then they can kind of go back to some of the guys a little higher in the pecking order, that they're confident will give good minutes as well. So, but yeah, as far as the guy's long-term potential, when you look at like next season and beyond, once Zach departs and a lot of possessions and usage is opened up on the offensive end, you would certainly think Miles will play a part in some of that increased usage going forward.
Yeah. And with that, even though we say he's kind of the 10th man off the bench or the 10th option right now, he's still averaging 11 minutes a game. And
Right.
when you look at the next few guys in front of him, Caleb First is at 14 minutes a game. From that 7th guy all the way down to the 10th guy, there's only about a 3-minute per game difference in there. And I think we've seen multiple times this year where Painter's just riding the hot hand a little bit because Colvin gets 16 minutes in that Gonzaga game. He gets 16 or 17 minutes in that Alabama game. And some would argue, I might be one of them, that Colvin was in that late stretch against Alabama specifically for defensive purposes, just to be able to handle some of the athleticism that Alabama had on the perimeter a little bit better than maybe what was being done to that point.
You're good.
So I think, sorry, I had a stat page up and it just randomly started playing a video. I was like, who's that guy? I think we're seeing development, and some nights that's Cam that's getting more run, and sometimes it's Miles that's getting more run. But I think we just see it can be multiple different guys throughout the year. It doesn't have to be the same number 8 or number 9 or number 10th guy all the time coming off the bench to step in and make a contribution. But once, I think individually, defensively, he's shown big strides when he's faced with athleticism and one-on-one type situations. that team defense, I think, still sometimes in terms of where he's supposed to be in his rotation or how he's supposed to come help side, that type of stuff, is maybe where improvement still needs to come. But don't you think over the last 3 or 4 games, it's definitely looked like he's just more instinctual in terms of where he's supposed to be defensively?
No, for sure. I mean, it's a repetition thing, right? The more game reps, the more practice reps you get, the better you're going to be at it. And as the season goes along, the more he gets thrown out there, the more comfortable he's going to be, the more chances he gets. You know, you're going to learn substantially more when you watch yourself on film and go over it with the staff versus if you're just watching someone else. It's just going to hit more close to home. And so I think he's had more opportunities to be out there, make mistakes or have successes, and then have that, go back over in the film with the coaching staff and look at those things and be like, hey, great job. This is, in this play, you did a great job being on help side when you were supposed to and rotating. Or here's an example that, you didn't jump to the basketball and you weren't positioned to help on the drive, so on and so forth. And so I think, the more and more he's out there, the more opportunities he's going to get better and get more experience. And that's why, as I said before, I think it's been well done by the staff to, give him these opportunities to have success. And in credit to Miles, he's, as you pointed out, Craig, with some of those games, the coaches have really rode his hot hand because, he's made shots offensively. And so, of course, even if he is having maybe some defensive breakdowns, making shots can cover up a lot of things. But I do think he obviously, from an athletic standpoint, he could really be a great defender in time. And even in some games this year, he's given great effort on the ball and utilized his size and athleticism to give us a nice option on that end. But for the most part, he's going to be in the game to score the basketball, provide spacing, and make shots when the ball finds him. And, there was that play against Alabama, right? Mason gets the crazy rebound, kicks it out, and Miles Colvin's in rhythm at the top of the key. And I think every Purdue fan at that point was like, oh, yeah, something good's about to happen here. So, Craig, you may think he's out there for defense from time to time, and who knows, maybe he is. But I think 99.9% of the time he's out there because they want buckets. So.
Well, we got our buckets here with us here today. Bobby Riddell joins Boilers in the Stands as we make our conversion from, he's been joining Braggs in the Stands here the last few years, and we finally made our turn to a little bit of a brand switch with the Boilers specific shows. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Please hit that like button, subscribe while you're here. We also have merchandise available. If you hit up Braggs in the Stands on Teespring, you can get all the Boilers in the Stands merchandise here during the holiday season. I know our guy Chase Chats was picked up one of the mugs during the Christmas season, so shout out to Chase. He's a good follow if you're on Twitter as far as diehard Purdue Boilermakers fans, and he had Bobby on here recently as well. So a lot to be excited about here going into this season. You talk about we talk about Miles Colvin and Camden Heide, and you brought up Lance Jones either as well, and you talk about the athleticism, the ability to knock down shots, but like Craig is pointing out, helping on the defensive end. Like Lance Jones, I think the first thing that stood out to me was like, man, this guy's not afraid. He's not afraid to take it to the bucket. He's not afraid to put up a shot. And even if he's going to have games like I got my guy, Mark Silverman from ESPN 1000, he's a big Saluki, alum and fan. He told me going in, he's like, there's going to be some games you love him, and then there's going to be other games you're pulling your hair out because he'll go 0 for 11. Well, so far we haven't really seen that, because the one question I had when Sylvie said that to me was like, I don't know if Painter's ever going to let it get to that point. Like he doesn't, maybe on the Salukis he had that leeway, but here at Purdue you're not going to. But now, 2 months in, obviously the offense is the first thing a lot of fans are going to notice. But at the end of the day, to stay on the court, it's all about what he can do on the defensive end. And man, he is locked down at times. Like he is a menace on the defensive side of the ball. Talk about kind of the impact that Lance Jones has made to this team and the different layer that he brings as far as defensive intensity.
Yeah, I love Lance for sure. I mean, I think, immediately just the first time I saw him play a game in person, I was like, wow, his lateral quickness is at another level. Because his ability to move laterally and get over some of these ball screens where he stays into the basketball, and fights over the screen, whereas a lot of other guys might, have to encounter the screen or get clipped. He's able to just move his feet so quickly. He can, beat the ball handler to the spot at times. And then, just in man-to-man defense in general on the ball, as it does a great job of keeping guys in front of him. Just the other night, that guy for Jacksonville who was having a lot of success, McCray, I think it was Robert McCray. He was having a lot of success, and then Lance, I think to some degree took it personal and subbed in and basically stole the ball from him twice in a row as the guy was trying to take him one-on-one, and Lance basically just slid his feet. The guy tries to go behind the back dribble. Lance just beats him to the spot, and the guy can't get his own behind the back dribble because Lance is waiting for it, and the ball squirts away, and I think we got it. So, I played against a couple guys like that, Lewis Jackson, Terrence Crump, guys of that nature that it's really depressing when you feel like the guy guarding you is moving faster laterally than you can like full speed. So I've been there where you make a good move and you think you're going to, get by somebody, but they're already there waiting for you. So Lance has that ability to where, and even though there's been, like Boo Buie, I don't think he has the same level of success he has that game if Lance is getting foul trouble. But give Northwestern credit, they also ran some schematic stuff to get Lance off of Boo Buie and get some of our other defenders on Boo Buie at times in space. But for the most part, Lance is going to be a guy who's going to take the challenge of guarding the team's best player. And, you saw like against Alabama, he's had some times where he struggles guarding off the ball. Because he's such a good on-ball defender, but the off-the-ball stuff can be tricky sometimes because, you got to have your head on a swivel, got to be in a stance at all times. And, Mark Sears had some success against him running off some screening action where he might have, lost his man for a split second or hesitated or got caught ball watching. That can happen. So that's something that they're continuing to work with him on, is trying to get better off the ball. But just having a guy, he would have been the perfect guy to have against Jalen Hood-Schifino, for example, last year, because he would have been able to use his lateral quickness and not allow Jalen Hood-Schifino just to get to his spot at will. Because a guy like Ethan Morton, for example, is a really good defender, but he has more success against guys who maybe aren't super quick with the basketball. Guys that he can use, like those wings are guys Ethan really does well on because he can stay in front, use his size, use his strength. But guys who are super quick laterally, Ethan, just because he's 6'6", it's going to be tougher for him. So having a guy now in Lance who can guard really a lot of different people gives our defense, gives us an option there to go against some of these best guards in the country that we're inevitably going to see, especially in March.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people that aren't around the Purdue program a bunch want to focus on Lance's scoring or his shooting efficiency. And I just don't personally, anytime I talk about Lance and what Lance can bring to this team, like, I don't think that's the number one thing that he brings to this team. Like you were talking about, he's fantastic as a secondary ball handler. A couple of different, there was one game specifically, it's not coming to mind right now, where somebody was trying to press Purdue, and Lance brought the ball up the majority of that time, even when Braden was in there, just because with his size and physicality. There was one game for like almost an entire first half where Lance is bringing the ball up, and just his ability to help break the press, his ability as a secondary ball handler, but then also to be a premier perimeter defender. Like, to me, those are by far and away the two biggest things that he brings to Purdue and that Purdue really needed. We've got shooters, right? I mean, there are shooters all around on this court and on this team. So, yeah, I think it's those two big things like you just mentioned. Now, Bobby, you talked about guys with elite lateral quickness that you got to play with or play against. Where would you rank Robbie Hummel on that spectrum of elite lateral quickness?
Oh, man. Yeah, I loved that Robbie Hummel matchup in practice. Get a little crossover, a little shake and bake, get some space from Hummel. As long as I didn't get inside the painted area where Robbie might send my stuff into the third row, I liked that. Yeah, that matchup with Rob. Get him going side to side. No, but yeah, Robbie's lateral quickness not necessarily his strength as a defender, but Robbie had amazing instincts defensively and was always in the right place at the right time. Obviously, being 6'8" and a good athlete, and in his own right, especially pre-injury.
Right.
Helped out.
You got to travel and go to a lot of different games so far this year. As you look back on the first 12 games, there's a lot of unfinished business. But what's maybe a moment in a game? There's been a lot of big games, so you've got a lot to pick from already. What's maybe a moment in a game where you saw something different, whether that's having a different player or just the way the team reacted or the way a player currently on the team improved, that told you like, whoa, like this is different. You know, this year we're at an entirely different level, maybe.
Man, like you said, there's been so many. Just in general, Braden Smith, I just feel like his confidence level in his own game offensively is, he obviously had a lot of really good games last year. We didn't win 29 games and multiple Big Ten championships without Braden being really good a lot of the time. But I just feel like there's no second guessing anymore with him. I think last year, I think there was definitely some second guessing going on as far as when to be assertive and shoot the basketball versus when to pass the ball to the National Player of the Year or pass to other guys, run the offense. Whereas this year, I think both the coaching staff and Braden, like there's just that full confidence and trust level. And so I think in the biggest moments this year, a lot of times, there's a lot of confidence that he's going to make the right play. But I will say like one moment that really stood out to me was, we just talked about Lance Jones a lot. And as you talked about, I agree with you. The defense and the secondary ball handling is the biggest things he's added. But in that Arizona game, he's struggling to shoot the basketball, hasn't made any threes, and they're in that zone. And, we have struggled against a little bit as far as scoring. I think some of the struggles were a little bit overblown by some of the people as far as our inability to score. I think a lot of that was just guys, missing some shots. We did have a couple turnovers against it, but we've turned the ball over against man-to-man defenses as well. But we are in that they're in the zone, and we haven't scored against it for a little while. And Lance Jones, the ball gets thrown to him in the right wing. And even after struggling to shoot the ball, he just steps into that shot with a lot of confidence and drills it and put that lead back up from 4-7 and actually made Arizona then jump out of the zone, which we then scored 5 straight points against their man-to-man defense after that. But I just thought Lance, to have that confidence, sometimes we struggled having, guys out there that were, willing to shoot those big shots and big moments and step up. And I think, Lance definitely in that moment was not afraid. And he stepped up and hit a huge shot there. So that was kind of a moment that stood out to me like, wow, big shot and a big moment from a guy who, even when he's struggling, is not afraid. And even Northwestern, he plays bad at Northwestern. We come back and play Iowa, and he had a really good game, didn't hang his head, still showed a lot of confidence in himself. So, there's been a lot of good moments, but those are certainly a couple that stand out to me.
I mean, because that's the thing, right? I mean, they're going to have so many open shots with the gravity that Zach Edey creates. They just got to have the confidence to take them and shoot with the confidence that you're going to make them. Like anybody can shoot it, but if you're shooting and you're hesitant, like you're not feeling that personal confidence that it's going to go down, it comes off your hand like that, as a shooter myself, I understand that mentality, I'll show you one day, Bobby, you have no idea, but that's the other guy is, the other end of this equation who we haven't gotten to. And there's other players I certainly want to ask you about. But while we're talking about the guards, I mean, Fletcher Lawyer, another guy that, is trying to take his game to the next level. We all understand his capability shooting the basketball. Can he hang defensively? Can he drive to the rim enough to make an impact? In that Arizona game, he just an unbelievable performance. Even caused some turnovers. I think he had like 4 steals in that game. Early in the season, he had a rough start the first 3 games out the gate, and you had Purdue fans like on social media going at him because, I think everybody's just going to always harken back to the ghosts of last year. And he goes out and has an unbelievable performance against Gonzaga, and so Tennessee. I'm sorry. Yeah, all these great games are starting to mold together, but thank you. So for Fletcher Lawyer, talking about taking that next step, I think it's clear Braden is there. And, we'll see how the rest of the season, if they can carry that over into March. But for Fletcher, he started out hot last year as well, big time hot, and then it fell off. So is he and are they, ready for this season fatigue this time around? Like, we all understand what they're capable of, and they'll probably get better, incrementally better as these years go on. But are they ready for the season fatigue, the beat down that the Big Ten gives you? They're going to be able to keep this level of play up as the Big Ten starts throwing the gut punches.
Yeah, time will tell, certainly. We'll find out. I think they're better prepared for it, of course, not only physically but mentally. This being their second year, they've gone through it. And Fletcher, I think, was dealing with some lower leg injury stuff last year, which certainly could have just been fatigue. Who knows exactly? But I think he's made a jump as well. And you pointed out the Tennessee and the Arizona games where he was fabulous. He played really well. I wasn't at that Arkansas exhibition, but was able to follow a lot of it, and it seemed like he played excellent that game as well. So he's had some big moments. The thing I love about Fletcher, we talked about guys not being afraid of the moment and really wanting the big shot. I think that's Fletcher to a T. We saw that a lot last year. Even that Fairleigh Dickinson game towards the end, Fletcher hit a huge three in the right corner that kept us in it right there. He wants the shot in the biggest moments, and that's what I love about him. He carries himself with a little of that swag and arrogance that you kind of need, right? You need that sometimes to be a really good player. You got to know you're good, carry yourself like you are, not be afraid to go against any sort of level of competition. And, sitting up close on the court, a lot of times you can see Fletcher smack talking back and forth with some of the opposition. And I really get a kick out of it because, he's got a little bit of that Larry Bird to him. I feel like as far as that, Larry, people say Larry was one of the greatest trash talkers ever. But I feel like when you were watching the games, that didn't stand out necessarily. I think Fletcher's got a little of that sneaky major league trash talking that he's able to do. So I've been really impressed with Fletcher so far this year. Obviously, we heard Coach Painter talk about it after the Northwestern game. He said he needed some of his guards to become two-way players. And I think it's all pretty evident who he was talking about. He's, focusing on Fletcher and Braden probably first and foremost there. Because those two guys are two of the best offensive players on the team. But he also, to be as good as we can be, we need those two guys to give good production on the defensive end as well. And we've seen Fletcher in both, really the Tennessee and Arizona games in particular. We've seen him have some really nice moments defensively as far as being in the right spot. There was one play against Arizona that really popped out to me that I loved. They ran a sort of a ball screen action and dive. And Fletcher was in the corner, guarding a guy in the corner. And he sunk down and was able to deflect a bounce pass that was going to the guy rolling to the rim, deflected it, and caused a steal. But he was in the right place there at the right time. If he was hugging up his man in the corner and not taking away that dive, it's a dunk. And he was able to be in that right place. And that's where, even though he's not the most athletic guy, the biggest dude, up here, if he's in the right place at the right time, it can give him some advantages. So, that's what the coaching staff, I think, wants to see, is just see him keep fighting, doing everything he can to be as good a defender as he possibly, can on that end. So it's been fun to watch Fletcher play this year a lot.
100%.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, in both that Tennessee and Arizona game, I thought he did a nice job defensively. But Larson and Connect are maybe a little different matchup than continually getting switched onto Boo Buie. Different skill sets, So as you look ahead, Bobby, I guess, and you've watched this team play 12 games now, what's an area that you look at and say, Purdue can still get better here? They're ranked right now, I think they're ranked 12th in KenPom defense. They're ranked number 2 in KenPom offense. So really high in both of those things. But I guess just as you're watching them play week in, week out, what's one area that you kind of focus on and say, this team can still get a little bit better here?
Well, certainly I think, and this is going to be a talking point all year, and it's already reared its ugly head a couple times, and it was last year too, but it's the turnovers. I think, and not every game is created equal, right? But if they're able to value the ball every possession to the best of their ability and not have any of those sloppy turnovers, especially those sloppy ones that can lead to buckets going the other way. we saw a couple, kind of random ones where Zach got stuck with the ball like in the corner against Arizona, and then he's trying to kind of throw it back towards midcourt, and it goes awry, and it goes the other way for some layups and dunks. Like, those were kind of random scenarios where Zach has the ball in a weird spot. But, those type of turnovers, those live ball turnovers that are going the other way for dunks, like, you just obviously got to try to limit those as much as possible when you get into the biggest games of the season. So just want to continue to see them value the ball as much as they can, because we're so talented offensively and we have so many weapons that, if we can just keep that turnover number at a reasonable amount, we're just going to be so hard to beat. But yeah, there's not a whole lot of areas for us to improve on, which I love. Of course, I just do think this team checks a lot of boxes and has all the pieces to go as far as possible. But, defensively, would be another area that you just want to continue to get better and better. That perimeter defense at times this year has certainly got exposed with guys like Bowie and Sears having big games against us. So just continuing to make sure we, maybe work on some schematic things that if teams are going to try to get certain guys in switches and stuff, like how do we combat that? And, I think the staff will be continuing to work on that and go through different scenarios to where if teams try to do that, we'll be better prepared.
For sure.
Yeah. I guess one of those spots that I'm interested in asking you about is with Trey Kaufman-Renn. Because I was very critical early on about his role on this team, how they were trying to put him into the starting lineup next to Edey. It didn't feel very comfortable watching. Seemed like they were having trouble figuring out their space. And now here recently, even in the Arizona game, he had some good minutes with Edey. And it just seems like now TKR is starting to find his way a little bit. Is that the case? And what adjustments have you seen that Trey has made to make it look more comfortable from our viewing eyes?
For sure. And this is another area I'll give the staff credit. I mean, it would have been really easy for them, maybe after the first handful of games, especially when maybe some of the games where he struggled a little bit. It would have been easy for them just to be like, you know what, let's go back to Mason in the starting lineup, or Caleb, or someone like that who started before at that position. But to their credit, they've stuck with Trey, and I think we're starting to reap some of those dividends. When it's those three guys are fascinating, right? They all three are such different players and provide different strengths and weaknesses. And it feels like what's been kind of nice this year is, depending on the game, the circumstance, the matchup, we're able to go to different guys depending on what skill set we need out there. Obviously, depending on maybe which guy's got the hot hand or something. Of course, Mason as a shooter, if he's shooting the ball extremely well, if he's having a Penn State game from last year where he's raining threes from all over, like they're gonna ride him more, of course. But I just like how we're more versatile at that spot now. We can play different ways. I think Trey, there was a big learning curve there, right? Last year he pretty much only played when Zach was off the floor, and so he would get a lot of post touches when he was in there. This summer, Zach was gone. They go on the European trip. He's getting every post touch imaginable. He was playing at a high level, scoring the basketball against those teams there in Europe. And then even in practice, him and Zach probably play on opposite teams a decent amount, right? So he's getting touches. So now playing a lot of minutes with Zach, that's been a big adjustment for him as far as, he's not going to touch the ball very much. So he's got to pick his spots. He's got to realize, like, okay, I got to be a major league offensive rebounder. We saw that in the Arizona game. I think he had 4 or 5 offensive rebounds in the first half. Has really been asserting his dominance there. I mean, that dude is physically cut up, right? Like, I think Mason, obviously he's a strong dude, but like Trey, as far as size and strength, like he's legit. And, at the 4 spot, he's going to have a physical advantage a lot. And so, and then defensively, I think he's played pretty well defensively. I think there was some concerns how he would defend on the perimeter. And I'm sure if you go back through the film, he's had some breakdowns from time to time, but I think he's moved his feet pretty well at that spot when he's been forced to switch on to smaller players. And then offensively, he's made enough threes, right? In small sample sizes, he's made enough threes. And the good news is he's made enough now that the percentages look pretty good. And so, if I was playing Purdue, I still would probably, you have to give up something, right? And so I'm sure teams will probably still give that up from time to time, but he's at least made enough to where he's a threat. I mean, he hits the three in the Alabama game. They're down 8-0. It's looking dicey, and he steps up and hits a huge three to take the lid off. That's a big shot in a big moment there. So it's been fun to see him get better and better, game in, game out.
100%.
Yeah.
And it's been nice to see a little bit of the willingness, like when he's not on the court with Edey early in the season, it felt like, okay, I'm going to get this ball and I'm going up with it. And now he seems a little more comfortable to pick his spots and know when to kick it back out, get better position, or kick it out for the shot. And I think that's key in his evolution too, is to not force it.
Yep. No question. Because he's a guy that, he can draw. He's got the ability to draw multiple defenders. He's been doubled this year. Teams are going to, especially when Zach's not on the floor, like he's going to get doubled if he gets it a lot of times. So, his evolution as a passer is something that, he certainly needs to continue to get better at. When, okay, it's one-on-one, when to go to work versus when to maybe kick it out to an open shooter. And that's something he's going to continue to get better at. But I agree. He's doing a nice job picking the spots for the most part. And that's a tough thing to do when you're, used to getting the ball and getting to shoot all the time.
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
For sure. It seems like Painter, especially at the beginning of the second half, they've been coming out and running a few plays for him right away. I assume that's a little bit of just trying to keep his defender honest. In terms of what they're doing with Zach, doubling Zach and everything else. But I don't know. Have you noticed that?
Sure.
Like Purdue's coming out and just like right away in the second half, right at the beginning, just feeding him 2 or 3 times in a row, it seems like.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think some of that is, you want to keep him engaged out there in the flow. And if he doesn't get a lot of opportunities in the first half, then maybe they try to, get him one. Like, definitely Arizona. I think first play they went to him and he got a bucket on Keyshawn Johnson, if I recall. And I think a lot of times they just like his matchup at the 4. One of the games they actually ran a set play for him at the very first play of the game. I forget now which game it was, but they liked his matchup there. And so, that's one of the benefits of having him at the 4, right? Hit the guy guarding him 9 times out of 10 is going to be someone you love, Trey, in that matchup on the block. Obviously, you're not going to give it to him all the time because you have Zach Edey and Braden Smith on the floor, but they're definitely, I think, going to try to find time to sprinkle in some touches for him when he's out there with Zach, because Zach's man is not going to be leaving Zach. Like, that's just, they're not going to double off of Zach. Most teams are not, because they're just going to be afraid of detaching from Zach. Because you detach from Zach, he's basically going to get an offensive rebound or a DZ dunk. We saw in the Northwestern game, they actually did double Trey, because that's just Northwestern's thing, is they're doubling the post no matter what. That's their rules. Well, in the second half, they doubled Trey early in the second half, and he's got Zach for just the easiest little dump-off dunk if he's able to get it to him. Unfortunately, the Northwestern guys timed their jump perfectly when he tried to make the pass and got deflected and went the other way. But that's a prime example of, if you do detach from Zach, it's going to be a dunk if we can get the pass there. So, they're going to try to get him some touches every now and then. It's just, it's tough.
Yeah. As you look to Big Ten play, is there anybody out there that you think can seriously contend with Purdue for a Big Ten championship? And I guess beyond that, are there teams out there just from a matchup standpoint, individually playing against Purdue, that you think have matchups to be able to really at least give Purdue a game within that specific game, even if it's not for the entire Big Ten season?
Well, to answer your first question, do I think there's a team that can legitimately compete with us to not win the Big Ten championship? That answer is no. I think the Boilers are going to just be too good. Personally, I'm biased, of course, but I just think we're too talented over the course of a 20-game season to not win the Big Ten this year. Certainly crazier things have happened, but I just don't. When I watch the other Big Ten teams so far, and I haven't seen large quantities of every team, but of the teams that I expect to be able to compete with us, I don't think there's a team I've seen that's going to be good enough to beat us and dethrone us from the Big Ten championship. But of course, there's plenty of teams across the country that have, personnel and matchups that can give us fits. We've played a number of close games so far. We've been fortunate enough to win a lot of them, but just teams. I think teams with really good guard play. I mean, they're going to. This is, of course, a lot of these teams give everybody problems, but teams that have really good perimeter players, I think, are going to be our biggest problem just because I think Zach, and he showed this a little bit with Omar Ballo. Like, I don't care how good your low post scorer is. He's not scoring on Zach Edey consistently. It's not happening. Right. I'm sorry to break it to you, but that is a massive feather in our cap, obviously, from a defensive standpoint, is if we play a team who's got just some random team across the country, if their best player is their center, like, that's bad news for them, in my opinion, if they have to play Purdue, because if you're playing Purdue, you want to have a lot of guards who can go and get buckets, because you're probably going to have – we see it every time a team plays Purdue, they shoot way less attempts around the rim. We saw Bama shoot 1,000 threes. Like, Zach's just such an elite rim protector, and his sheer size, he's deterring everything around the basket. Arizona didn't go to Ballo very much. When they did, he had little success on those true post-ups. So, teams that I would be concerned about playing, obviously the good thing about being Purdue this year is I'm not concerned really about anybody we play, just in theory, because I think we're better than everybody. But of course, there's some teams that have skill sets that give us more problems than others. And I would think teams with really good guards, as we saw with Northwestern, if you have 3 good guards and they all play great on the same night and Purdue doesn't bring their A game, then yeah, you're going to be in a possession game probably, and it couldn't go your way. But if we play a team that's got a really good big, I like that. I like that matchup. So
Illinois, Ohio State.
Yeah, like Illinois, of course. Their team, they got Dane Danger, who's a good post player, but like that would be, a matchup like that where I don't think Dane Danger would have a whole lot of back to the basket success against us. But he's not their focal player. He's more of a complementary player on that team. They obviously go small and shoot a lot of threes. And so on that, any particular day, Illinois could beat the Boilers, certainly, if Purdue doesn't shoot it great, and Hawkins and Shannon and Luke Goody and Quincy Guerriere, is that how you pronounce his last name?
Yep.
If all those dudes are raining from 3, then yeah, it's going to be a tough day. But we even saw with what's so good about this Purdue team is even if a team like Alabama is making 13 threes and a half, we're down 2 points because we're a great team in our own right, and obviously are going to dominate the glass pretty much game in, game out. Arizona was the best rebounding team in the country, and we handled them on the board. So we have a lot of positive factors that are in our favor that can combat teams' really good shooting. But Illinois definitely is a team that I think they're certainly the biggest threat to Purdue. Ohio State, they got some talent offensively. I think they could certainly give Purdue some problems. Let's see, Wisconsin, their experience, they got some guys who can make perimeter shots as well. But, I also like our matchup against them because, Tyler Wall is a really good, kind of that 4-man who can wheel and deal and score with his back to the basket. But last year we would put Zach on him, and Zach would do a really nice job neutralizing his ability to score around the rim. So I think that's kind of a matchup that favors us. But that's a couple of Big Ten teams that could certainly give us problems. But really, any Big Ten team that gets hot from long range any particular day, is going to have a chance.
Yeah, like you said, Purdue has a lot of different variables. Don't go their way. Guys get in foul trouble, not making their free throws. Turnovers were a big problem at Northwestern. Boo Buie had 35 points and 0 turnovers was the bigger. Yeah, he was unbelievable that day, and he'll probably never play a game better than that one this season. And I've said this about Northwestern I've said this a long time about IU, and now Northwestern's starting to fall in this category. Like if those 2 teams played every team like they play Purdue, sure, I think we might find those 3 teams in the Final Four. Teams just get up for Purdue now, and you've seen it over since you've started, as the color commentator for Purdue men's basketball radio, how many different teams, not within the Big Ten, that have stormed the court after they beat Purdue. Like, that's the kind of environment you're walking into is, David versus Goliath and a raucous crowd and a team hungry to beat you, to prove it to themselves what they're capable of. And, it's a lot of pressure, and Purdue doesn't always come out on top, and that's the name of the game. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out. I'm certainly excited for it. I'm sure we'll talk to you more as the season progresses. We haven't been bugging you as much, and I don't like that because I like bugging you. But I've just been so damn busy, Bobby, and you're lucky because you're getting off easy as far as I'm concerned when it comes to that. But let's fly through some of these, super chats as we start them. Just for some of the questions from the chat. Blake Widmer asks, question, in game, do coaches get on a guy for taking a deep three or a bad shot? I know post game coaches will talk about it, but in game, do coaches ever challenge player choices, or do they just simply switch them out and put them on the bench?
No, I mean, the coaches will definitely voice their displeasure with a player in the moment if they feel it's needed, especially if it's something that's kind of over the top or egregious. If it's borderline, maybe not so much. That might be something that just gets addressed later on in film or something if it's questionable. But like if a dude takes like a 35-foot, three contested in transition, like he will not only be yelled at, but then yes, he will also be subbed out a lot of times with that. So no, that definitely happens. As a player, you're trying to avoid those circumstances where you do something that's going to draw that level of ire. But
Lance seems to be the guy that's willing to take the one from a little deeper than he should, even if it's not a heat check. It's just like he feels it in rhythm and he's going to take it, even though it's 5 steps beyond the 3.
For sure. I mean, he definitely has that in him, and it's all based on where you are in the hierarchy, right? Like a guy like Braden Smith can take a bad shot or two, maybe just get yelled at a little bit, chirped at a little bit, but he might not get benched. Whereas like if Bobby Riddell takes a bad shot, like you're getting benched and yelled at immediately. So, where you're at in the hierarchy sometimes plays a part in that, of course, as we all know.
On the flip side of that like supreme confidence Lance has, don't you think that's bled over to Fletch and Braden a little bit? I've heard Braden talk about it a little bit, just in terms of like, I don't know, Lance's confidence and his joy and everything just kind of bleeds through the whole team sometimes.
The joy is a great word there, actually, because I do think, and I know you're not a huge Warriors fan, but or Steph Curry fan, but that joy that Steph Curry plays the game with, I do think Lance has a little of that. Like it's kind of infectious. Like, it just looks like Lance loves playing the game. Like he loves playing at Mackey Arena, it looks like, in front of the fans. And I think that is infectious, right? Like I think you need some of that just to take some of the pressure. These games, there's so much pressure in all these games and number 1 ranking and all this stuff. Like these guys put a lot on every game. And I absolutely think you're right that Lance's aura or, vibe has rubbed off a little bit on the whole team. And I think it's been great because I think the swag and joy he plays with is something this team needed.
Yeah, we have another one here from Jason
Depew.
Jason,
I only know that because I lived in Warsaw, right? And the orthopedics industry, there was a Depew biomedical services.
Okay.
That's the only reason I know it.
I didn't know if you guys were friends personally. I see.
No.
Well, if he lives in Warsaw, I'll never forgive Warsaw for the regional championship game against Crown Point, where they held the ball for 4 quarters and the final score was 12-10 to end Sasha Stefanovich's high school basketball career. It was one of the more disrespectful things I've ever seen in my entire life. So I'll leave that there. But he also would like to know Bobby's opinion on the best way to attack high hedges on picks for Braden. Seems to be when the turnovers pick up against that defensive play style.
Right. So I think he's talking about when we run high ball screen action, when teams get out there and really high hedge, whoever's man is setting the ball screen. Yeah, I think we saw Northwestern do that a good chunk of that game and have some success. Certainly, I think that's the best way to probably make Braden not a scorer. Just because if you high hedge like that, a lot of times you're getting 2 guys on the ball. A lot of times they'll try to have Braden speed dribble past the hedge, because then if he speed dribbles past the hedge, now all of a sudden he's got an opening, can get downhill, and that's where we saw a lot of times in that Northwestern game, he would get around the hedge and he would pass up a couple, like he got towards the rim and maybe passed up a couple layups he could have taken and sprayed it out to shooters, because Northwestern would always bring their weak side low man over into the center of the lane to try to take away the guy, Zach Edey, a lot of times diving to the front of the rim or any penetration. And so that play a lot of times was to spray it out to the corner for threes, which Braden did a lot in that game. But, it's pick your poison, right? Because if you're going to high hedge, that means, Zach Edey is rolling to the rim and there's no center down there to handle him. He's going to be, if there's anyone taking him on, which there should be, to take away the dunk, it's going to be a guy who's undersized, and Zach can obviously have a big advantage right away if Braden's able to get the ball out of his hands and get the ball moving, and someone finds him before that center can hedge and recover. So it's a pick your poison, right? But we've seen a lot of teams do that drop coverage that Purdue does, and Braden Smith has just lit it up because he's dribbled into some mid-range jumpers and threes. And that drop coverage does a better job as far as taking Zach away as the roller, because you got that center kind of dropping and staying with Zach. But it's all about execution. Obviously, if a team hedges really well with an athletic guy, it can be an effective strategy because it doesn't let Braden just walk into jumpers, and you get some big size and athleticism on him, and it can lead to turnovers, right? Because you got two guys on you, you got a lot of hands. If a pass gets deflected, that can be a turnover. But of course, if you're spreading yourself out like that with a high hedge, you're exposing yourself on the back end too. So it's really each team's philosophy, but that's why matchups can be important in the tournament, right? If you play a team that's elite at high hedging and has a lot of athletic dudes who can do it at a high level, maybe that could be something that works well against Purdue. But who knows? Time will tell. But yeah, it's really about Braden trying to the best of his ability of get around that hedge as fast as he can, and then at that point he's got usually some space, and then he can either try to get to the rim or maybe set up others.
And then the final one before we let you go, as Bobby's been on here for an hour now, and we really appreciate all your time. But Brad Prather wants to know, how much fun is it to watch history being made with Zach Edey looking to repeat as the National Player of the Year?
A lot of fun. I mean, what a special player, Zach Edey. It's trying not to take it for granted, getting a chance to watch him, up front, close and personal all the time, because he's just a force. He's dominant. He can shoot free throws extremely well for a guy his size, which is obviously pivotal considering how often he gets fouled. I think defensively he doesn't get the credit that he deserves for how well of a defender he's become. I mean, teams just don't shoot at the rim at all against us. Really, the only success teams seem to have is when they're able to run some of that ball screen and lobbing action where, Zach, understandably so, gets put in that tricky position where he's got to try to stop the ball handler and take away the lob. And if it's run really effectively, it can certainly work. But for the most part, his rim protection and how well he defends is special. Teams can't score on the block against us for the most part. And then offensively, can score with either hand, can go either way. In that Arizona game, scored a really big basket over his right shoulder with his left hand. We were only up 4 points. It seemed like momentum was not on our side, and he goes to his offhand, just bucket right in the center of the lane. He's the best, one of the best rebounder I've ever seen. Nobody can guard him. Just gets fouled 24/7. Dudes just having to shove him in the back essentially because they have nothing else they can do. And so, yeah, it's been a pleasure. He works really hard on his game. He's a good teammate, well liked by his teammates. So yeah, it's been a pleasure to watch him play for sure.
Yeah. I still feel like, because he does have another year of eligibility. Nobody believed me last year when I said he'd come back this year. I think there's less of a chance, but I still think there's still a chance.
I think that ship has sailed.
You think it has? Okay.
I mean, obviously, if he reverses course and is like, I want to come back, then Purdue would have 15 scholarship players. And then we might have to send multiple guys to prep school. But I don't think that situation is going to transpire. That's
interesting. I think what it is with a lot of these guys is they feel like it's embarrassing to play that long, and they don't want that reputation. Like when the announcer's like, it feels like he's been here for 10 years. They don't like that part of it is they want
I think there is some of probably I've been somewhere 4 years. I planned on being here 4 years. I'm in my 4th year. I'm ready for a new challenge. I think there is some of that, right? Even though, maybe monetarily or, competitively, you might be in the best position to come back. I think a lot of guys are just, they mentally get themselves in a spot where okay, this is my last year. and then they can go, all in kind of thing, both mentally and physically. But
I just thought maybe the NIL element of this changes things with how much you can make per year and balancing that off of what you make, for someone like Zach, who's considering a professional career. But again, that's something we can talk about at the end of the year. Bobby, really appreciate you coming on. How was your Christmas? Was it a success?
Great.
Santa deliver all the gifts?
Santa came through.
Do you guys do prime rib? You do ham? You do turkey? What's on the Christmas dinner table?
We did my in-laws. At my in-laws, we did ham, and then at my parents' house with my siblings and stuff, we did turkey. So mix it up with both. And
all my beef industry friends that are listening are going to be upset with you.
Oh, what do they want? What do they like? The prime rib.
Beef. They raise beef. They want to see you serving prime rib. That's okay. Yeah. I do a seafood. I do all seafood for our Christmas dinner. So
I love prime rib as well. I certainly would not have been against that option either. But So great Christmas. And yes, we got another Purdue game on the 29th, and then we head back onto the road, take on the Terrapins. Hopefully Maryland can remain in the funk that they've been in for the majority of the season when the Boilers come to town. But we saw how tough that place can be to play and win at last year. So,
what was your favorite Christmas gift you ever got in your life?
Ooh,
man.
Wow.
A lot of great gifts. I'd probably say my first ever Nintendo, the NES with Super Tecmo Bowl. Santa brought me that one. That was sweet. I think I remember that one the most fondly, I suppose. But a lot of.
Because how old are you, Bobby? You're young.
37.
You're 37. Because I was about to make a joke that you're older than me, but you just act older than me. I'm actually older than you, but you're older than me in maturity years. Because when you said Nintendo, I was like, oh, you're kind of dating yourself. But at the same time, then I suddenly realized, because my co-host with CHGO Bears, Adam Hogue, he acts much older than me. He's an old soul. And I always make these jokes that he's older than me. He's like, Braggs, I'm 2 years younger than you. And I'm like, fuck, I forget this. So yeah, you're right. My favorite Christmas gift was getting the Nintendo 64 and Cruising USA. So we're kind of in the same mold. Craig, what was your favorite Christmas gift you ever received?
Well,
is the Red Rider tricycle.
I'm pretty sure that I got an Atari for Christmas if we're going to be dating ourselves. So
there we go.
But no, I was trying to think while you guys were saying that. I don't remember, nothing jumps out at me one way or another. So,
well, all I know is
I know.
Uh-oh.
This year for Christmas, my mom was like, "Here's a wad of cash to blow in Hawaii."
There you go.
That's one of my favorite Christmas gifts. She's like, no, I'm not gonna buy
anything.
I'm
a great Christmas gift, apparently.
Yes. Yeah. That's great. Now my daughter's now singing Frozen songs on a loop, and I've kind of it was cute 2 weeks ago because she had just entered this Frozen phase. She's 5, so she didn't have the attention span to watch a whole movie. Now she's locked in. She's watching this whole movie and she's singing every word. And I was so proud of her at first. I'm like, look at her. She's taking this song and she knows the song. Now I'm like, okay, Addie, enough. I'm hearing these songs on repeat. So yes, Midwestern goodbye in full force. We got to let Bobby go. Blake's right. He's been on too long. But we miss you, Bobby. We
gotta go play with some Hot Wheels and monster trucks and stuff.
There you go. All right, we'll let you go, Bobby. Enjoy your beautiful family, and we will see you. I am finally going to be at Mackey on Friday. I'm looking forward to it, and I'll give you a big bear hug when I see you. So
absolutely.
Take care. Thank you for all your time here tonight.
See you guys soon.
That is Bobby Riddell, former Purdue men's basketball guard, current color analyst for Purdue men's basketball radio, doing a great job with those guys. So, that about wraps things up here tonight. I got a Bears show here coming up in 45 minutes or so. So, that's about it. What else you got? You got anything else, Craig?
Greg, what is a higher probability, or we could say what's a lower probability? Zach Edey comes back or Justin Fields is the starting quarterback for the Bears next year?
Oh, shit. It's close. It's close. Only like if you told me that if you asked this question a week from now, and if the Bears have the number 1 pick, then it would be 100% Zach Edey's the better chance. Because if the Bears have the number 1 pick, they will not be keeping Justin Fields. They will be drafting Caleb Williams. That's my prediction. I'd even bet big money on that. But we don't have the number 1 pick locked in. In fact, they could fall as far as all the way down to the number 4 pick if things went cataclysmically wrong. If I said that word right, I don't know if I did. Might have had a stroke halfway through that word. But so we'll just have to see how that plays out. But I still, it's just like last year. And hey, last year I said these things and everyone was like, no way. And then it ended up happening. And it's kind of the same reasonings I had last year, and it's almost more so this year. Like his game is what it is. It's one of the greatest college games you'll ever have for any player. How he translates to the NBA, we all understand some of the hurdles he's going to have to overcome in that challenge of his career. But this NIL thing certainly changes the landscape and how much he makes per year. He can make a lot of money. The legacy aspect of how, what he could shatter every record. He could be up there with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as far as accolades in college basketball history. Never mind the fact that you're also chasing a national championship, whether they get that this year or not. All those are layered things. And then so if you stayed and then you went to the NBA a year later, it's not like the NBA is going anywhere, and your challenges of how you'll adjust to the NBA will still be there. So, those are, I think, things that he'd have to balance. But at the same time, I know Sasha went pro and he had an extra year of eligibility. And I think some guys, they just, I don't think this was, I'm not 100% sure if this was the case with Sasha, so I'm not speaking on his behalf, but I just think some guys almost look at it as like a scarlet letter to stay too long. It's a bad look, but I think the NIL has kind of changed that mentality a little bit, because at the end of the day, now it's a business and they can make serious money here. And there's nobody more marketable than Zach.
No doubt. I think at the end of last year, he was possible early second rounder, definite mid second rounder based upon the reports that came out afterwards. Uh-huh. I think this year he's worked himself in the conversation of being a late first round pick for the NBA and at minimum an early second round pick. So I just think he goes personally. Jeff Parks asked, not even a mention of Joe. We love our guy, Joe. Joe is off this week. He had some stuff. I don't know what he had. I just know when we were talking about potential shows this week, he was tied up and busy.
He couldn't do it tonight. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Goddamn. You guys get out your fair share of Joe. You barely get any Greg. Now you get, hey, I know Joe brings the thunder.
He's back. He's back Friday. He'll be
back Friday. I'm going to be at Mackey Friday. I'm excited to be there, bring some content, do some different things and try to add to the arsenal here of some of the visuals that we give here on Boilers in the Stands. If you watch on the YouTube channel, and if you are, please hit that like button before you hang it up here tonight. We appreciate. Somebody said, this was a great show for Boxing Day. I've heard this term before, but is that a Canadian holiday? Great show for Boxing Day, fellas. Thank you, Buckets. I'm pretty sure Boxing Day is a Canadian holiday. Let me look it up because I've never heard of this before.
It's the Canadian holiday.
I knew it. Okay. Yep. Canadian holiday for Boxing Day. I wonder why they call it Boxing Day. That's all I got. So we appreciate you, Jeff. He says all three of you are great. We appreciate it. And we certainly miss Joe here tonight to ask some more educated questions. I'm always asking big picture narrative questions, and Craig's obviously gives the nuance of the history of this team and a great X's and O's guy himself. And then obviously we all understand what Joe brings to the table from an analytical and basketball knowledge standpoint. And there's very few that are as good as Joe when it comes to that. So we missed him dearly here tonight, but he will be back. Okay, so here it is. That's the answer. Nancy Williams says, Canadian holiday, box things up for the less fortunate. Okay, I like that. Boxing Day. Well, I like it. I like it. It makes sense. The Boxing Day here would mean, if somebody doesn't think the Bears are going to be good next year, that's what happens. So, you did see me ask Santa for a national championship, right?
I did. I appreciate that.
I'm doing my part
Yes.
here. Got
Yes,
on Santa's lap and asked him for it.
Yes. If you believe in mystical old men in the sky, yes. I'm glad you asked him for a national championship. Hopefully he can do that.
Well, I was asking for a lot of things because, my Chicago sports team are an absolute wreck right now. So, but yeah, that about wraps things up here tonight. We appreciate Bobby Riddell once again coming on here for Boilers in the Stands and giving his knowledge, and he's doing a great job with his coverage. Him and Rob Blackman, nobody better, calling the game. So make sure you're always tuning into them and their pregame shows. Midwest Tokers really pushing his limits. Bears won't be good for years. You better watch it. But yeah, again, please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already to our channel. We appreciate those things immensely. And again, we put it in the chat earlier, but if you head over to Brags in the Stands on Teespring, if you Google Brags in the Stands on Teespring, I know we put the link in the chat as well. We have a bunch of Boilers in the Stands merchandise from t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, hoodies, stickers, cups. Now you can have some of that Boilers in the Stands gear at your house or when you go to the games. There would be nothing cooler for us than to see you guys rocking that stuff while you guys are in the stands as well. So we appreciate everybody's support in that regard. So that wraps things up. That's my Midwestern goodbye. We'll be back Friday for a post-game show. We'll be at Mackey Arena. We'll be covering the press conferences and doing our post-game show as we always do. So make sure you tune in for that. Enjoy the rest of your week. Holiday vacation for some kids. So if you're tuned in and you're not doing any homework, enjoy it. Watch some movies. That's what I used to do. So until then, we'll see you Friday night. Covering the number one team in the country, the Purdue Boilermakers. Can't wait to see it. See you at Mackey, guys. Boiler up.